Hello and welcome. Hi, I'm Dave. This tutorial is part of a Node.js and Express for Beginners tutorial series. I'll put a link to the full playlist in the description below. Since creating the last tutorial, I realized there's a lot of confusion concerning the concepts of authentication and authorization. They're often used interchangeably or simply abbreviated as auth, but they are not the same things. Authentication refers to the process of verifying who someone is. Authorization is the process of verifying what specific resources a user has access to. When we log in with a username and password, we are verifying who we are, and that is considered to be authentication. After logging in, our Express API issues users JWT tokens. JWT stands for JSON Web Tokens. While it's true that the tokens confirm the authentication process has already taken place, these tokens also allow access to our API endpoints, which provide our API data. This is authorization. A hint towards this fact is that a JWT token uses the authorization header. Today, we will expand the authorization process by adding user roles with specific permissions to our API authorization process. We're going to start with the code repository from the last tutorial, but if you don't have it, you should be able to easily follow along without it, or you can download or clone the starter source code from the link I've provided in the description below. We're going to start by going to the config folder in the file tree and creating a new file, and we'll call this file roles_list.js. In the roles list, we're going to create the user roles. Now this could be in a data table in a database. This is just how we're going to do this. And you'll find that user permissions can be constructed in an assortment of ways. And we're going to apply a fairly simple structure today with 3 different user roles. So we'll start out with our roles list constant, and we're going to set this equal to an object, and the keys will actually be the names of the roles. So we'll have admin, and then we'll have a code that identifies the role. And then after that, let's create an editor role, and we'll call this 1984. And then let's have just a user role, and we'll give that 2001. Okay, now that we've created our roles list object, all we need to do here is module.exports and set that equal to roles_list. Okay, we've saved that. Now we're ready to go ahead and modify our users model that we have in the users.json file. And you might find that once it has been written by the read and write file process that we use in Node, we're using this user.json file, it might all be in one line. But I believe if we go ahead and just put a return and edit and then save in Visual Studio Code, it should go ahead and format that file for you, so it's a little easier to read. Now this is what we had after the last tutorial. We have a username Walt1 and a username Walt2. They all have their own passwords, and of course we're tracking the refresh tokens. I'm going to copy in the file I've created. It adds one more user, and so you can copy this file out of the completed source code that I'm going to link to. There's a starter source code link and then a completed source code link. Or you can go ahead and use the register route, create your own new user, and you can see I've added Dave1 as well as our Walt1 and Walt2. Dave1 just has the role of user, while Walt2 has the roles of user and editor, and Walt1 is not only a user, but also an editor and admin. So you can see we're going to support multiple roles. I'll go ahead and save this file. Once again, you can copy it from the completed source code or just create your own third user if you want to. And we'll just edit these manually. Now there could be an admin area for whatever service you were creating, and that is where these additional roles could be created. But what we will do is just ensure when everyone registers, they're given the user role, and then of course later on you'd think an admin that was in charge could add the additional roles if those roles were to be granted to other users. So now we can collapse the model folder and the config folder, but let's look inside the controller folder and let's look at that register controller that we have. What we want to do is add that role of user with the 2001 code when any user registers. You can see we're creating our new user right here on line 19, and we have the username and the hashed password. So let's just go ahead and add this extra role. I'll break this out on separate lines, and that way we can see the new part that we add. And what we want to do is just in between username and password, add roles. Let's keep that lowercase. And after that, let's put this in an object. So then we have user, and then we have the code 2001. And then remember to put a comma after roles so it goes before the password, and save. Now let's go to the auth controller. And when we authorize and create the access token, we will want to send this information in the access token. So we're going to change our payload for the JWTs. Now first, when we know we have a match and we have verified our user, so everything is good, we want to go ahead and grab the roles that we put in our user's JSON file. So let's go ahead and define roles and set this equal to object.values. And then we can pass in the found user that we have above, and we want found user dot roles. And so now we'll get those values inside of roles. And now let's change our access token payload just a little bit. Since we're not just going to send the username, let's create a new namespace here with user info, and then this will be an object. And inside this object, we'll have username. Let me go ahead and add the closing curly brace for the object here. So we'll have the username, but then, oh, we don't need that closing curly brace. But then we also want to add some more information here inside of the user info object. And the next one will be roles with quote, and we'll just pass the roles that we've created. It looks like I actually did need that extra curly brace, or at least we need to indent here, and then we're going to need to close out our payload. That looks correct, I believe. And if you want to break this onto another line, you can do that as well. We'll go ahead and save, and there we go. It gets formatted a little bit better already. So we're using this user info as a different namespace, and that's good because this is considered to be a private JWT claim, because there are some reserved abbreviations and words for public JWT claims. And you can find out more about that at jwt.io, I believe. I'll confirm that and leave a link in the description below so you can check out more information on the JWT claims if you're interested. Now, there is no reason to send the roles in the refresh token, and ideally the access token will only be stored in memory on the front end, but we don't have control over that. So when we do send the roles, we're just sending the codes and not actually the word admin or editor or anything like that. So we just are kind of hiding what each one is by using codes. But at the same time, ideally that access token would only be stored in memory anyway. But there is no need whatsoever to send the roles in the refresh token. The refresh token is only there to verify that you can get a new access token. Okay, now speaking of the refresh token, we need to go to the refresh token controller and add some of the same code, because that refresh token does issue a new access token. So right underneath where we have verified or we've actually decoded the refresh token here, and we have the decoded, and now we have no error and everything is good. So we want to come down to this line right before we create the token, and here once again let's define roles and set it equal to object.values, and we'll pass in our found user once again and the roles that are associated with that user. And now we can use the new namespace as well. So we'll use user info again, and then we'll create an object, and inside this object we'll have the username, which is the decoded username, but then we'll also want to put the roles once again. So now we'll have roles, and here we can just pass in roles once again. I need a comma, it looks like. And now let's save, and it will format a little bit better, and that looks correct. So we have user info with username and roles. Now that we've updated our tokens to include the roles, our access tokens specifically, we're ready to go to middleware because we're going to have to create some new middleware to verify those roles. But first, let's look at the verifyJWT file that we already have. I'd like to make a couple of quick updates. One is when we define the auth header. This works, and especially when we have control of the front end as well, and we know we would define authorization with a lowercase a. However, it can also come in with an uppercase. So instead of this, let's go ahead and just say .authorization, which is essentially the same thing that we had, but then we can also say or, and then we could have request.headers.authorization with a capital A as well, just in case it comes in with a capital. Now we know we're going to grab it either way. After that, let's go ahead and change our if auth header as well, and let's look for an optional chaining method here. So we say if we have, or if we do not have the auth header, actually are saying, and also starts with, and here we want to have bearer, and this is supposed to be a capital B by the standard. So we don't really have to look for lowercase and uppercase like we were here. So we're verifying that, first of all, if we do have an auth header or if it starts with this. And we're actually looking to say if we don't have an auth header, and then this optional chaining says, okay, well, even if we do have an auth header, if it doesn't start with bearer with a capital B and then the space after bearer, then we're going to return a 401 because it is not a correctly formed authorization header that starts with bearer and then the token as it's supposed to. It looks like we left in a console log from the last tutorial. Let's go ahead and take that out where we were just viewing the bearer token in the console. And now after we decode this token, when we're verifying the JWT, we also want to set the roles here, not just the user on the request. So let's have request.roles, and we'll set this equal to decoded, and now we've got a different namespace. So it's .userinfo.roles. And we need to make the same change up here when we get the username, because now it's decoded.userinfo.username. And now we've got the correct namespace for both, and we can save our verifyJWT middleware. And now it's time to create our new middleware. I'm going to collapse the open editors so we have a little more room. And in this same middleware folder, let's create a new file, and let's call this verifyRoles.js. Inside of verifyRoles, we're going to create middleware named verifyRoles, and it's going to accept a lot of parameters if we want it to. It's however many roles we want to pass in. And the way we do that is with the REST operator. It looks just like the spread operator, but it lets us pass in as many parameters as we wish, and we're just going to call them allowed roles. Now from there, we need to go ahead and have a middleware function, and you know that takes request, response, and next. So what we need to do, and this allows us to pass in the allowed roles by having this on the outside, but we need to return a middleware function, essentially an anonymous function here with request, response, and next. And now inside of this function, we'll have everything that our middleware would do. So the first thing we need to do is say if we do not have a request, which we should because our verifyJWT will come before this, but let's go ahead and do that just to be thorough. And then let's use optional chaining to say, okay, even if we do have a request, it needs to have roles or this should not be valid. And if it's not valid, we're just going to return a response and send the status 401, which is unauthorized. Now we need to define a roles array. Let's keep that lowercase, camel case actually, roles array, and set this equal to the allowed roles that were passed in. Now we're spreading those into a new array here. Now that we have this, let's go ahead and log this to the console. These will be the different roles that we're passing in. And of course, there will be the codes associated with the roles. But let's go ahead and log roles array. So when we go ahead and test this, we can see everything that we expect to. And we'll be comparing this to the request.roles that we just set inside of the verifyJWT that will be executed as middleware before the verifyRoles middleware. Okay, so we'll log both of those just so we can see what's going on. But now we know we have an array of user roles that are coming from the JWT, and then we have the roles that are passed in that will be allowed, and that's what we're going to compare. So we're comparing arrays, and I'm going to define just a result here, and let's set this equal to request.roles.map, which map creates a new array, and we'll have a role, and for each role essentially we'll compare to the roles array, and we'll see if the roles array includes the role that we're passing in, and if it does, it will return true. That's what includes does. And if not, it will return false. It's a Boolean. So we'll have a new array, and we'll have a true or false for everything that was in the request role. So if we had 3 different roles here, we'll have possibly true, 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 or true, false, true. Who knows for sure, but that's what we'll have. So we need to filter this array. And all we need is one true to know that the role can access the route that we're verifying. So what we want to do then is chain find, and we can just say for each value, the true and false, in the new array that was mapped, each value, we'll check the value to see if it's equal to true. And if it is, it will return. If it finds a match, it will return the very first one it finds. Or if it finds no matches, then we won't have a result. And so that's how this works. I'm using 2 higher order functions here essentially. So we're mapping over the roles that are sent from the JWT, and they're assigned in the verifyJWT to request roles, and we're mapping those, comparing them, and getting true and false results back to the roles array that will be passed into this route. So we'll pass in however many roles we want to. This array could possibly only have 1 role, or it might have 3 or 4, however many we're checking for or want to allow to this route. So once we compare those and get all the true false results, we're just using find to say, hey, find the first true. And if there is any trues, it will be good. And if there's not, it won't. And that's what we'll do next. So we'll just say if there's no result, essentially we did not find a true result, we're going to return, and then we'll say res send status, and again we'll send a 401 unauthorized. Otherwise, we'll just call next because everything's good and we're ready to move on, and we're going to let the route be accessed. So let's save our middleware, and we'll know when it runs, we'll see the arrays that we're comparing in the console. And before I forget, we also need to add module.exports and set that equal to verifyRoles and save. Now let's collapse the middleware folder and open up the routes folder and then the API folder, and let's go to our employees.js that has the different routes, get, post, put, and delete. We have a couple of imports to make here, so let's go ahead and define our roles list and set this equal to require. And now we need to go up and up again, and then we'll look in the config folder, and then we'll find our roles list. And after that, we need to go ahead and define our verifyRoles middleware, set this equal to up a folder, up another folder, middleware, and now we're going to verify roles. And I'll save just because I've completed the imports, but now we need to add this to the different routes. Now let's just leave the get route open because anyone could access that. Or if we wanted to put verify roles and at least verify their user, but they already have to have the JWT because we required that ahead of time. So they'll have to have the JWT to access the get route. So kind of the user is the default. But after that, in the post route, let's put in verify roles, and now we can pass in the different roles list values that we want to let access this route. So we'll type roles underscore list, and now dot admin will work. Remember, this is the key, and then the code is the value. So admin is the key. And then we could also put in roles underscore list dot editor. And that makes sense because you could have an editor that could post a new value as well. Okay, then I'm going to copy the verify roles that we just added here. And looks like maybe I'll put a space here. And then in put, I'll do the same thing and add the space. But now in delete, let's say only an admin can delete anything from our database. So we'll save that, which gives it just a little bit of a change. So now everyone can access the get route, but the post route should be limited to any user that's an admin or an editor. The same for the put route, but then the delete route could only be used by an admin. I think we're ready to test this out now, so let's go ahead and open a new terminal window. You can do that from the terminal menu, or I'll just use control and backtick. I'm on Windows, and I'll type npm run dev to get our dev server up and running with our API, and then we'll test this out with Thunder Client. Okay, I'm going to drag the terminal window up just a little, give it some more room so we can see the console log notices that we get. And from there, I'm going to click on Thunder Client here on the left. If you don't have Thunder Client installed, you can get it through the extension over here and then just search for Thunder Client. And there you see it. And now that you have it, or once you have it, you'll be able to click on it over here on the left, circle with the lightning bolt, and you can create collections. And of course, we've done this in some previous tutorials. If you have followed along in the series, I've got an auth collection here, and the very first thing we'll need to do is authenticate a user. Let's look at which user we're going to authenticate first. Let's just do Dave1. Remember, this user only has the user permissions. It does not have an editor or an admin permission. So I'll send, and I get the access token. I'll copy this access token, and now when I go to the employees API and go to get employees, I'll go to auth here, paste in the new access token and send, and everything is good. But if I do this for post, if I'm in time within the 30 seconds it was given, and send, I got a 401 unauthorized. So that means our verify roles is working. As we look down here, we've got the two different arrays logged to the console too. So this is the array that has the roles that we were looking for, that we passed in. 5150 is the admin, 1984 is the editor. But you can see our user only had role 2001, which is just a user. Okay, now let's go back to my auth collection here and the auth route, and let's change who we're getting a token for. So now this will be Walt2. He is an editor and also a user, but he is not an admin. So we can send this, we get a new token. I'll copy the token. And now we can go back to the employees API and we can post a new employee, or we should be able to. We'll put in the new token here and send. And yes, we posted John Doe, so he's now number 3, has the ID of 3 in the employees list. But if we go to the delete route and go to auth, I'll post in this same token and attempt to delete. And, oh, we're out of time. We got forbidden. So let me go ahead and try to re-verify here. We once again got Walt2. We get a new token. Get that new token once again. I didn't copy it right the first time. There we go. Back to employees. Now we'll attempt to delete. I'll pass in the auth token and send. And we got a 401 unauthorized. And that is because the role did not verify. Now you can see you had to have the 5150 code, which is admin, that was passed into the route, but Walt2 only had the 2001 and the 1984 code in his roles list. Okay, once again, let's go back to the auth route now, and we will change to where we are authorizing Walt1. Walt1 should be an admin as well as a user and an editor. And so we'll send that, get a new token. And now we can go back to our employees delete route that was just denied to Walt2, paste in this new token, and attempt to send the delete request. And employee ID 3 is not found. That's because NodeMon restarted, I believe, and of course employee ID 3 isn't in there. So let me go ahead and request another token, and we'll see if we can create ID 3 again quickly and then delete it all in the same. So here's our new token for our admin user. Copy that, go to the employees post route, paste in the auth and created. Now let's go to delete, paste in the new auth, and we deleted with an OK. So I just had to be quick enough to beat the 30 seconds with that token. But here you can see the user, our Walt1 user, had 2001, 1984, and 5150 in his roles, and the API route needed the 5150. So when it matched, everything was good. Hey, just a quick note on testing with Thunder Client, and I want to point this out in the controllers and then under the auth controller. But when you're testing with Thunder Client, it honors the cookie setting for secure true or not. So if we were to set a cookie and then use the refresh token here, you would need to remove this or the cookie would not work with Thunder Client. However, this is required, as I noted in a previous tutorial, when working with Chrome. So just a note, if you're testing the refresh endpoint with a refresh cookie, you'll have to comment this part out or at least take it out for testing purposes with Thunder Client. But then when you work with Chrome and in production, you'll both want that secure true back in here when you create that refresh token that is saved in a cookie. We did not use that today, and the refresh token does not store any information about the user roles, and it shouldn't. However, just wanted to note that for you in case you were testing out that refresh token with Thunder Client. So there you have it. We created our verifyRoles middleware, and you can see both of those that we've been logging to the console. I'll go ahead and delete those now before I commit it to GitHub and get the console logs out of there. But there's our verifyRoles middleware, and you of course saw how we applied it to the routes in our API for our employees. And you can just pass in the different roles that you want to let access that given route. Give this video a like if it helped you get started with the Express framework for Node.js. And thank you for watching and subscribing. You're helping my channel grow. Have a great day, and let's write more code together very soon.